Hello everyone, welcome back. This lecture we are going to continue focusing on components and templates. Let's continue our journey on components and templates. So in the last lecture we were we discussed the topics of template reference variable, the input output parameters that allowed interaction between the parent component and the child component. Now we are going to discuss a very important topic in Angular, which is lifecycle hooks. Each component in Angular as a life cycle. For example, when it is initialized, when it gets modified, when it gets deleted. So directive and component instances have a life cycle, and as Angular creates, updates, and destroys them. We can tap into key moments in that life cycle by implementing lifecycle hook interfaces. So So since these every component as a life cycle, you can use those life cycle events to do some actions at the specific time. Angular allows you to tap into those moments using predefined interfaces and functions inside it. So let's see how we can tap into those life cycle hooks and make use of that time. So, so there are many life cycle hooks that are available in Angular. I've mentioned the three most used lifecycle hooks, which are ng on init, ng on destroy, and ng on changes. So as the name suggests, ng on init is used to do a set of action when a component gets initialized. So what I will tell you the example what you can do inside ng on init function. When you inside a class, you usually initialize some variables inside the constructor. But inside the constructor, you can't do some heavy work like getting data from a service, fetching data from other service, or in that case, you can't do that inside a constructor, and it is not advised to do so. So for that purpose, we have ng on in it. So you can, as it is said here, it is a good place for a component to fetch its initial data. Whatever data you want to have when the component gets initialized, you can do those actions inside ng on it. The next one is ng on destroy. As the name suggests, this is called by Angular when a component gets destroyed. For example, if you are switching from one component or one page to another, the current component will get destroyed. In that time, this function will get executed. So in ng on destroy, we'll have the logic that must run when the Angular destroys the directive. That means whatever you want to delete from the current component, anything that is already available, you can just delete so that the memory gets free. So ng on destroy is used to have the actions that you want to do when the component is getting deleted. The third one is ng on changes. More than ng destroy, you will be using ng on changes definitely, because during when there are changes in the components, you might have to do something. So as it says, like ng on changes is called whenever there is any change to input component properties of the component. So it is very clear that ng on changes is called way more than ng on it and ng on destroy. While ng on init and ng on destroyed are called only once during a component lifecycle, ng on changes occurs whenever there is a change in the component. Let's see how to use these lifecycle hooks inside our Angular component. So to use these lifecycle hooks, all we have to do is you have to implement the particular interface. If you are going to use ng on init inside your class, you need to implement on init interface. Then only it will allow you to use the ng on init inside that. So the syntax that you have to add is as simple as adding implements the interface name and then the corresponding function inside that, function name ng on it inside that. Inside that, you can write the block of code that you want to execute when the component gets initialized. The procedure is the same. If you want to use on destroyed, you just have to replace this by on destroyed, and here you have to use ng on destroy. So that is the procedure for using any lifecycle hooks in your component. So I'm going to dive deeply into ng on changes because this is something that you might be using very frequently. Mm, So let's the this is explained in the context of a parent child component, which I explained in last lecture. Parent child component is nested inside the parent component. So in child component, we have two input parameters, hero and power. Those are actually two text fields inside in the template. I have not mentioned the template here, but in the template they are two text fields. And then yeah, in the component, this is the same component, child component. You are implementing ng on changes. It is understood that you would have implemented on changes, and you are mentioning this service in parent component. You are calling or you are embedding the child component, and then you are sending the values of these input parameters. So this will get changed as the user is changing the value in the input text. So once the user is changing the value in the text box, you can get the parent will send that value to the child, and in the child you will use that in ng on changes. So in ng on changes, all the changes will be can be extracted from changes, which is of type simple changes, which is a default class in Angular, and you can just iterate in changes. You can iterate the property names in the changes because there might be multiple fields which are being changed at the same time. So you have to get a particular property name, and then you have to access that change, that object inside the change object, and then you can see the current value and the previous value. We are just logging. You'll be logging the current value and the previous value, which means previous value, as and when the user is typing, the value gets changed. The current value will have the latest value, and the previous value will be the one character before or something like that. So as and when the user is doing some changes, you are tapping everything. This is a simple use case, but you can use it in a more intelligent manner. So in this way, you can make use of ng on changes component lifecycle hook. So we have seen life cycle hooks right now. So these three are the most important lifecycle hooks that everyone will be using. But there are more lifecycle hooks which you can take a look in the Angular documentation if you're interested. And component interactions. So this is a very important topic because when you are creating more than one component, you definitely have to pass some data from one component to another component in some point of time in Angular development. At that time, you will be confused like how can I send data from one component to another. So in that case, this thing this you can come and check this lecture. It will be very useful to you. So the first method is like passing data is also based on parent-child nesting. So passing data from parent to child with input binding. Input binding is nothing but even in the last slide we saw at input, and you can send from the parent by nesting it. So it's already covered in the last lecture and even in the last slide. Next one is next one is also same, almost the same, but here we are, instead of just getting a variable, we are mapping it to a setter in child component. So this is the child component, as it has the name app name child. In that, usually the first one you will be having a variable where you will be getting a data from the parent. Now instead of a variable, you are having a setter called set name. Name is the parameter, but you are having a setter function. So what the advantages this has is use that you can use that value that you're getting from your parent component, and then you can do whatever manipulation you want, and then you can store in a variable that is inside this component, and you can do whatever with that thing. So instead of just getting the value value from the parent and just storing inside a variable. You are just intercepting it. You're intercepting the property, and then you are manipulating the way you want, and then you are storing in your private variable. So in the parent class, so we have a list of names which we are so we are nesting the app name child. I showed the selector app name child. So you are embedding app name child inside the parent component, and then you're iterating over names. I mean, Dr. Q, the empty name, Bombastic, everything, and then you are sending those names to the child component. So in this way, so first Dr. IQ will go from here as it iterates. Dr. IQ will go, and then it will come to the setter. So instead of setter, it will go and it will trim whatever if it has any space or something like that, it will just trim, and then the manipulated value will be stored inside the local variable or private variable that you have, and you can make use of that variable whatever you want. The third one is intercepting input property changes with ng on changes child component. So you are making use of ng on changes in the child. So this is the child component. We have two input we have two input parameters which are major and minor, and this component implements on changes because we have ng on changes inside it. So we are getting the changes which is same like simple change, of the type simple change. So I will show you the parent class also, so that you will parent component also, so that you will get. So the parent component is as simple as this. So they have they are defined the template inside here in inline itself. So it has two buttons which has new minor and new major, and it is embedding the child component, uh, and and it is passing the variable major and minor to the child component. So these values are computed over here. So the value gets increased as the button is clicked, and the current value is passed to the child component. The child component will get all the changes from the parent. So from the parent, and then it will iterate through the changes that iterate through the different parameters. And then first we are setting first we are executing one iteration of the one iteration. So you will be using the first parameter, maybe major, and then you are just getting the current value of the major, and then you can do whatever the computation you want, like if it is first change or something that you can do. So the procedure is like you are sending the, as usual, you are embedding the uh, child component in the parent component template. And then here how we are executing is different. In the first in the last thing we were using at input, and we had a setter in it. Now we are just making we are using ng on changes lifecycle hook, and we are using that value that is passed, and we are making some computation. So you can use a variable. I'll summarize. You can use a variable, you can use a setter, and you can now use the on changes component as well, on changes lifecycle look as well. So this is so till now we are just passing some values inside a specific variable like that. So now we are going to see how we can directly access the child components, variable functions and everything. So to from parent component, if you want to view a child, so this can be done. This is one of the life cycle, like after view init. After view init is one of the life cycle, that after all the view of the view is initialized only, you can do this. So to do a view child, to view the child component elements, you have to use the add view child metadata function, and inside that you just have to import the child component, and you are mentioning the child component inside add view child. This means you can view this child component, and then you are creating an instance of the child component. So even adding it inside a view child is also important, and then creating an instance of the child component is also important. So since we are implementing after view init, we have ng after view init lifecycle hook in it. So which means once the view gets initialized, we can make use of the child components property, and you can also make use of child components methods called start and stop. So add view child metadata function allows you to directly access the uh, child components properties and functions if you want to make use of them directly in the parent component. So we are done with component interactions. So we saw four methods. First one is through input output parameters, which I discussed in last lecture. Second one is intercepting through a setter. Third one is intercepting through ng on changes, and the fourth one is through accessing all the parameters and the functions of the child component through view child. So next one is dynamic components. This might be quite challenging at this stage for you because there will be a lot of jargons that you wouldn't have heard before in the previous lectures. But stay with me. I will try to explain this as simple as possible. So till now we were statically loading components. We didn't have any dynamic components or dynamic components, or we already defined that this component will load when the router is going to this location. So now we have to see how to dynamically load a component, that is like in between or whenever you want you can load a component in specific spot. So let's see how to do that. So to do dynamically load a component, you need a directive file. So you have to create add dot something whatever name you want to, and directive.js. Inside the directive, you have to import the directive and view container view container reference. Ref is nothing but view container reference from at angular/core. So let's say that this is a metadata function. As for everything, for component you at component, at for module you had ng module. Same way for directive is at directive, and then you are giving a selector. Giving a selector is very important. You have to give inside square bracket like this, so that you can make use of that. You will see how it is being used there later. And then you have to initialize. You have to create a instance of view container ref. That also will be a way you will understand when I explain the next slide. And then the component, let's see the main component. So add component is going to be a part of the main component where you are going to dynamically load to keep changing the ads, because the ads will be changing dynamically. So you want to suddenly change the ad, so it should be dynamic. It does not make sense to have it static. So let's have the component that we are going to talk about mainly is add banner component. That is the main component. So it has like advertisements. It has a header called advertisement, and this is a block. This is a block where you are going to keep changing dynamically loading the components. So that how you have to do this? All you have to do is you have to just insert ng template. So to load this ad, you have to give ng template and then the selector. Now you're seeing where it is being used, right? So in the template, you're adding ng template and the directive name. So now we have to resolve the components. Resolve the components in the sense that we have to load the components. So we are going to the same class. We are seeing the class part. So it implements two lifecycle hooks, which is on init and on destroy. In on init and on destroy, you're going to get the ads from a service. So ads from a service, and you are adding you are viewing the add directive, since add directive is going to be the block where you're going to load the ads. So you're adding it as add directive so you can access it anytime. And in the constructor, you're going to initialize an instance of declare an instance of component factory resolver. Component factory resolver will allow you to load the ads. And since we are implementing to the lifecycle hooks, we are going to load components as soon as the a component gets loaded, a component gets initialized. So let's see the load component function. So in the load component function, all we are going to do is like we are going to see the number of ads that are there, and we have to get a single ad in that first to load first. And then ads is an array where you have all the components of ads that you want to load, and then you are getting that specific ad inside the ad item. So this is the main part. The component factory resolver is the class that allows you to load the ad. So, so what you have to do is inside the component factory resolver, you have to use the method resolve component factory, and you are giving the add item dot component. So you have a number of components inside, number of add components inside that, and you are using this method called component factory resolver, class called component factory resolver, and that resolve component factory. So you are adding that component over here, and once you are resolving it, you have to get the add host uh, add host container reference. So for that you have to use add host is a directive, and yeah, there's a child component. So we are viewing that child. So we have used view child. So you can use that components child components method object. So inside that child component, we are getting the view container reference which we initialize in the constructor, and then you are clearing means if there's any component already, it will clear all the reference, and then you are creating a new component, which is component factory is the first add that you got from this, and you have initially you have it inside this variable, so object. So you can just add this as an argument, so it will go into a component reference, and that's it. Like, and if you want to pass any data, you can just pass the add item dot data. So this seems too much. I mean, like at this point of time, you are seeing a lot of jargons in this one, which you wouldn't have heard. I will try to explain it again, like one short recap so that you'll understand it. So first, you have for dynamic components, you need a directive which you will be using in the component next, and in that directive you want to import view container reference, which will be useful in the component. You have to create an instance of that, and then you have to have a selector for it, add host. In the component, this is the template of the component. So in the template of the component, you should have a separate space, the directive you are testing inside this parent element. uh, this you are nesting this directive inside this. Instead of a component, you are using a directive. Instead of a child component, you are using a directive. That's the difference. So for to to load a directive, you have to use the keyword ng template and then the selector name, and then inside that components thing, so you are getting all the ads, and you are listing the add directive as a child. So you I mean you are viewing the child components using add view child, and in the constructor you are initializing, or you're declaring component factory resolve, which is the main method for loading dynamically. So once the component gets initialized, you are using two methods. There's load component and get ads. So let's see the load component. So in the load component, what you're doing is from all of the methods, all of the ads that you have, you're computing the index. And once you compute the index, you get a specific out of the ads array, you are getting one ad out of one ad component from that. And once you get the component, you have to resolve that component. So for that, you're using component factory resolver method resolve component factory, and then you can add component dot item add item dot component, which will go inside the specific ads component is inside this component factory right now. And then we are using that view child. You are using the view content reference from the child component, and then you are storing it here. And then from view content reference, you're clearing water. If there is any component already there, you are just clearing all the components in your in the child component. And then once it's there, you are creating a new component inside that, which you already got in the component factory, and you are putting that inside the component reference. That's it. If you want to add anything, or if you want to add any data, you can just add it. So once you load this inside the component reference, this component reference, you have to put some data. If you want any data to be added, you can just add item.data. Whatever is associated with the data will be passed on to this, and the component will be displayed. That's it. That's how you use dynamic components. This will be very useful when you want to keep changing something on your screen. So finally, we have come to the end of components. From next lecture, I won't be mentioning anything like components or something. We'll be going to more advanced topics like forms. So if you have any doubts, please feel free to leave it in a comment. Leave it in the comments. And till then, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.